Welcome back to Squawk Box this morning. Spot Ethereum ETF set to begin trading today. The SEC approved ETF applications from 21 shares, Bitwise, BlackRock, Fidelity iShares, Benek, and Franklin Templeton, along with Invesco Galaxy. And joining us right now to talk about all of this and what it means for the crypto industry and what is now, we'll describe as a milestone, another milestone. Anthony Pompliano is here, founder and CEO of Professional Capital Management. Pop, it's nice to see you.
Good to see you.
You think this is a game changer or not really? You seem less excited this morning than when you were here on Bitcoin Day.
Yeah, well, let's go look at the Bitcoin ETF. I think, historic thing, probably the best ETF launch in history. One of the interesting stats is that the BlackRock Bitcoin ETF has had more net flows than QQQ year to date. Right, so just massive flows there, over $500 million just yesterday alone. And so I think what a lot of people say is, well, that was the first one. Is the second one going to be as big? And I don't think that's true, right? If you just go and, before I came on, I looked at all the major news sites. People aren't talking about it as much. And so like the media attention, the hype, all that stuff isn't really there. And so it brings you to the question of like, why are people not talking about it as much? And I think part of the challenge for Ethereum is that the story isn't as clear. It's very clear with Bitcoin, right? It's digital gold. When we start talking about Ethereum, you start talking about a technology platform. There's a lot more competition, et cetera. But if you go and you talk to the people at Bitwise, they're launching ETH today. Yep. What they would tell you is, well, actually, there's diversification. People on Wall Street love that. And so maybe actually the benefit that Ethereum will have is just people say, well, I don't want to have just one. I want to have a couple of them. It's Bitcoin, it's Ethereum. Let me do like a 70-30 split, and that'll be good enough for it. And so I think that we really got to see what these flows are going to look like because the story isn't as clear. You're not going to get access to the staking. So the cash flow that people really like about Ethereum isn't available to these kind of ETF holders. And I think that the flows itself are not going to be nearly as big as Bitcoin. And so the question is, how much impact on prices is this really going to have?
Walk us through just what the flows look like on Bitcoin to the extent that that's going to be a model at all. Even if you said this 70-30 idea that you're going to diversify in that way, you'd say, well, then should you just say that, this is going to be 30% of whatever that was?
Yeah. Well, I think that the flows on the Bitcoin side, some of these funds have 10, 15, $19 billion in them, right? I mean, these are real money that's moving into these things. What I do think is interesting about the Ethereum ETF approval, and probably the thing I've taken away the most, is less about Ethereum and more about the rest of the market. What this signals to me is that all of the altcoins are going to come to Wall Street. It may take a while. There may need to be some regulatory clarity. They may get treated a certain way, but these things are going to come to Wall Street. And so what went from a 0 to 1, is it going to be Bitcoin, is it not, is now going to be a crypto industry. And the reason why that becomes interesting is because people who have this portfolio model or portfolio approach are going to start to apply that to all of crypto.
For those that don't follow all of this, does Ethereum ultimately, to you, have the same sort of restrictions in terms of how many Ethereum there ultimately will be on a relative basis to the way Bitcoin is set up?
Yeah.
Because that, to me, is a fundamental issue.
Yeah, it does not. One of the issues that I think the critics have with Ethereum is that the monetary policy mimics much closer to kind of the US dollar, right? There are these periodic decisions as to whether the monetary policy is going to be more constrictive or not, how many are going to be available, et cetera. So again, the story isn't as clear, it's not as certain. What I do think is also interesting is that Ethereum long has said, hey, we're the smart contract platform, and they were the dominant one there. But now there's a lot of competition, right? It's not the fastest, it's not the cheapest, there's these other blockchains that have come forward. And so I actually am of the belief that there will be inflows to the Ethereum ETFs. The Ether price will go up, but it's just not going to be to the magnitude that people kind of are hoping for because of these other pressures.
What is the Pomp family going to do as it relates to all of this?
I'm highly biased. I sold all of the Ethereum that I owned last year. I bought Solana. It's outperformed. And so
you're now a Solana maximalist.
No. It's the second biggest position. And really the thought process is the Bitcoin position that we own, we're going to continue to hold. But there is an entire other universe there. And so the thought process being you want to be in the asset that is cheaper, faster, and likely going to receive more flows. And if you go and you look at DEX volume, right, decentralized exchanges on Solana is actually eating into the market share of on Ethereum. And so we just think there's a lot more momentum. It's a smaller market cap asset and likely to outperform.
Let's flip the screen around and show everybody Bitcoin, just where things stand right now. Curious, we sort of went up the mountain. We went down the mountain. We're climbing the mountain again a little bit. In terms of, if this is price discovery, what do you think is really happening?
First of all, we've been doing a lot of mountain climbing over the years, so I don't think there's anything new. What I do think is happening, though, if you watch over just the last 2 weeks of Bitcoin has been very sensitive to a lot of these geopolitical or kind of uncertain moments, right? If you go back and you look at President Trump's assassination attempt, Bitcoin on the news dropped immediately as soon as it was breaking that he was actually okay. Bitcoin ripped higher. If you go and you look last week or last weekend and you see Joe Biden going ahead and coming out and saying he's going to drop out of the race, Bitcoin again, as soon as there was news, drops, comes right back as soon as there's some certainty, he goes ahead and he endorses Harris. And so I think that these assets really are starting to kind of blend the line. It used to be the crypto industry and traditional finance. Now what you're starting to get is just an overall financial market.
I don't know what you're saying there exactly.
What do you mean?
So you're saying he's out and there was a hope that maybe it would be someone more electable than Kamala Harris, and then when you find out it's Kamala Harris, it goes back up?
It's all about certainty, right? So like when there's an assassination attempt, what ends up happening is the news breaks, hey, the potential president got shot. And so all of a sudden people are freaking out,
right.
Prices drop. As soon as he's okay, price comes back. If you go and you look again at the announcement, hey, the current president is not going to seek re-election. There's uncertainty. What's going to happen? Who's he going to endorse?
I would have thought former president gets shot, that could cause a civil war or something crazy could happen. Mm-hmm. You would actually think that if this is gold,
right, which is
gold and Bitcoin should actually go up in those moments. Yeah. And then when you actually realize that he's okay, you should be like, okay.
This is about the regulatory oversight.
No, I think that what people end up
But the same thing happened when it was Biden getting out. I mean, that's why it doesn't make sense.
But it's also, you think treasuries.
But I
think treasuries before gold now for safety. Don't you?
Yeah, I've said that for a long time.
Yeah.
What's interesting to me is just think of it as human nature, right? When you hear a piece of news, right? So I was sitting eating. Somebody said to me, "Hey, President Trump was just shot." Right? Literally got a text message. I jump on Twitter, and you have this feeling, almost this like human nature takes over. You're like, "Oh my God, what happened?" And then as soon as you realize, okay, I see the video, I see the news, etc., you kind of okay. It looks like he's all right, etc. I think that markets react the same way. And what's really interesting is both of those situations happened on the weekend. Yeah. Stock market is closed. This is open.
Right, but Andrew's right. You would think it would be a flight to safety, and it's not.
Well, ultimately it was, but I think that the initial reaction to a news like that is fear. And then you do the flight to safety. And so all that happened, by the way, in 15 minutes, right? But what we're talking about is kind of that initial shock of the news. And some of it may be algorithmic trading as well. Just, hey, negative trading, news, prices drop. Right. But I think that in both of those situations, Bitcoin was up 3% on Sunday after President Biden dropped out. And so I think that that asset specifically is starting to insert itself and becoming a signal for what is happening in the world.
But how much of that is just the regulatory overhang and thinking, okay, if you get somebody at the SEC who is not so opposed to Bitcoin, you'd have an easier way of doing things? I
think Bitcoin's through the threshold on the regulatory front. What I do think applies is all these other assets. I mean, the ETH ETF, to the point of if these altcoins are going to come to the market, I think that people will start to allocate to.
The BZS is to really inspire the stewardship and care and conservation